You're so slow.
I'm Zoe. My mom is Alexis, and my grandma is Rochelle Sanders. I'm not really sure what and my grandma's mom is Gail Sanders.
There you go. Where's the breakfast? Okay, all right. Our catering queen, Abraxas, will come to the mic
Okay.
as soon as she's finished. Now, she's learned the work ethic of our family. She's work and work.
The show will go on.
The show will go on. I hope everybody has eaten or has gone up to eat. We were going to do a table by table. It looks like most of you have already started. Yes? Good?
We'll say that a different way. If you haven't gotten some food yet, please go get some food.
There you go. Yeah, come on. All the food is ready. Wonderful. Thank you. Brother Ricky, did you introduce yourself? Hello.
Fred.
Fred. Reed the third. Did you introduce yourself?
My name is Fred Reed the Third. I think my sister just introduced me. So it's not much of a reason.
That's him.
But I'm serving. And thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Okay. Are we all done?
No, it's done this high too. Little Ricky.
Oh, where is it?
Oh, way over there.
Stand up. Okay, you can be loud. Come on, be loud.
Hello, everybody. Hello, Ricky. What's that?
I can hear you.
My name is Frederick the Fourth. I am the grandson of Fred and Diddy. Fred the third son, so that makes me the fourth.
Do we have any other holdouts?
Any other holdout?
Okay, all right. Next to my brother is Don. Say hi, Don. Wave to us, Don. Say hello. Hi. All right, that's Don. Are you ready?
Mary Kimbrough, I want to introduce my friend George Snee. He went to get the DVD player all the way to Camp Divergent on the water. Yes, wonderful person. Good heart, wonderful. Okay. Now we're going to introduce this over there.
Is it ready?
The genealogy. Yeah. Elector Price, who is an expert on genealogy. That's the theme of this. Who are we? Who are our ancestors?
Yep.
And this is scientific. We're in a new age of science. What does this mean? How? Yes, please come up to the.
Yes, here, she can have this chair. Mary, she can have this chair. When Electra is finished, I want to...
Dance, baby, dance.
I just wanted to do a quick rundown of how we got to Mississippi, because that's what she's going to be talking about, is who we are from Mississippi onward. So I was going to summarize that, but I'm going to now summarize it after you're finished. Oh, good.
Yes, okay, so now she's speaking. Every time I tell people my ancestors are from Mississippi, the whole room gets quiet. Ooh, Mississippi. It's like being from the deepest, darkest part of.
It is.
Thank God for here.
As it is now, I can't imagine how.
Hello.
Get back to it.
afternoon, welcome to all of you, and congratulations for gathering together. It's a wonderful, wonderful thing that you're doing. I have known Diddy over the years, and to put me in the proper chronological perspective, I'm younger than Fred, but older than Diddy. I started researching in 1988, and it's addictive, and I've watched changes over the years. Diddy asked me to talk about some of the problems and some of the great things that happen as you do your research. I'd like to give you an idea of what happens when the census taker or the enumerator comes into your life. First of all, the first census was taken in 1790. And it wasn't until 1870 that blacks were designated on the census schedule by name and surname. Wow. Prior to that time, we were property. And you would find us on the census listed by black, male, 33, mulatto, female, 10. And this is part of what we have to search into to find out where we are coming from. Okay. As I did took on my responsibility from Diddy and started looking, and I started with Sylvia. You have a number of family members who are putting information on Ancestry. And when I look at it, my first thought is, wouldn't it be wonderful if they would all get together under one big group and share what you have? And you find out information that will save time. Let me tell you about the profile of the census taker or the enumerator. Following the emancipation, and they were taking the census, can you imagine what it was like to have in the South a white man coming into a non-white family home asking questions? Because the slave traders were looking to bring these slaves back in to work on the fields. As a result, the information that they got was not always the truth because they didn't want to get identified. Right?
Thank you, Holmes.
And what would happen is, what's his name? Bubba. Oh. But what is his real name? Bubba. Okay. And what's his name? Bubba Jr. That's Bubba Jr. When was he born? Let's see, it was about spring of last year. The crops we were putting the crops in, and that was the closest they had for documentation. And I'm telling you this because genealogy without documentation is mythology. And you will see it over and over in the census. The census taker often had an attitude. I don't want to count these people. And going down the country road, it's hot. I'm tired. Who lives down there? Oh, that's Mr. Jones and his family. What's his wife's name? And the children? And that was as far often as he would get. Remember these things when you're looking at the at ancestry and even the census. Use this as clues and hints until you find governmental documentation. And what I mean when I say governmental documentation, birth records, death records, Social Security, military records, and usually as genealogists, if we can find 3 records that have the same date, then we figure that must be it. In many instances, when you're looking at the Social Security, you see that the person is older. You want to get that money sooner. So be aware of that. I use a 3-year leeway when I look at and I try to estimate, an age. A literacy of the enumerator, they didn't have to be. Imagine an enumerator who spelled phonetically and wrote what he heard.
Uh-oh.
All right?
Yeah.
When you look at some of the spelling, you would not believe what it was they were trying to write. I got stuck on Aloysius. Discrepancies you'll find in the ages, order of birth, because they wrote them as they heard it and just put it in the list. And often when a newbie to genealogy looks at it, they assume that the oldest one is the one at the top. And that's not often the case. Another little clue that I use, and you'll run into it. How many wives did the husband have? Look at the age of the oldest child. And when you find an oldest child that's close to the age of the wife, then you know this must be a second wife. And you start, searching it that way. All of these little things can make a big difference in getting good, thorough records. In the 1910 census, the photography it was so bad that many of the archives wouldn't even keep them in there. It's hard to read them. And many of the blacks who were listed, you can't find them because of the poor census. They're trying to correct it now, and hopefully this will be a benefit as they go on. I don't want to keep it too long. Naming patterns. Oh boy. Well, I heard 4 Freds in here today. Okay. Imagine what it's like when you're going along and you see a Fred. Look over and see what the date is, because if you don't, and then you run into another Fred, you're going to get into trouble. So try to analyze so that it makes sense. And you look at it and say, okay, this is the age, and this is a Fred. Well, who is this? I could go on and on and on. Naming patterns, order of birth, age of the spouse. The 1930 census is interesting because they were interested legislatively in the economic status of the families and wanted to know who had a radio. And a radio was a measure of status and economic, and you'll see it on the census thing. They have the list of radio, and they'll put yes or no. And I believe it's on the 1930. where they ask about the marriage and they want to know the age of marriage. And so often people will get the age of marriage confused with the age of the individual or the length of time that they've been married. What I say to you is use Ancestry, Family Search. Help me out over here. Ancestry, Family Search, Heritage Quest. These are all different programs that you can use, but carefully analyze what you see in them. It can get you into trouble if you don't. In fact, doing genealogy research will get you into a lot of trouble, and so what I say to clients, I am not responsible for what I find. Now, I will find what's in the record, and you decide how much you want to reveal. And one of the stories that happened just recently, and I'll end on this note, UPS is always dropping books and stuff at my house. And so the driver said, "What do you do?" And I said, "I'm a genealogist." "Oh, really?" And then they get interested. And so I took a mental note, and I wrote down I asked him his father's surname, where his father was born, and did a quick research. So the next time he came back, I handed it to him. "Oh, wait till I show my dad. I'm going down this weekend." So he went down that weekend to show his dad. When he came back, I said, what did your dad say? He said, "Boy, where did you get that from?" Now I gotta tell him tell your mother about what happened And I'll end the note on saying, we are all brothers and sisters under the skin.
Yeah.
I do have a connection to your family in that Johnny Ware was the superintendent of Bible school at Beth Eden Baptist Church when I was just so high. And I remember Pocahontas so very, very much. So it shows you live long enough, you begin to see this. Enjoy yourselves, get to know each other, but for those of you who are researching, please get together, because you can put a program on, you can use their program, but keep it within the family so that you can share. Because I have run into a number of you. Who's Zeus? Okay, somebody named Zeus is putting information in there. Because you don't know Zeus. I know Zeus. Okay. And there were a number of others, but do share. I'm giving to, yeah. She caused me to do 44 pages of research. And so she's got a good starter there. And maybe if you give me or her my email address, there's information that I could get from you that would add on to what Diddy got me into. Because especially, I can't look at the census after 1940. So any of you doing research who was born after 1940, we have a time trying to find you. You are the ones that give us the fit in trying to see the Sylvias and all of the others of the history we can find. But, privacy. 70 years have to pass before you can have a public look at the census schedule. Yes, dear? You know I can't see that far back.
72, not 70.
72 instead of 70. Okay, all right. All right. It was wonderful talking to you. Yes.
Tell us about DNA.
I don't know a thing about DNA. He's back there. Yeah.
Thank you, that was wonderful. And so we can all begin. I get my DNA done recently. I didn't know I was bringing it to my mother's side, so I got to do it again. Somehow, Alice will explain in a minute in a minute after Gail is going to tell us some stories of our family, some early family stories, Grandma Hoover and various people that she has learned. Gail?
Hang on to that microphone.
Yeah, nobody gets a mic. We have an interesting family history, and I look at him when he was Gates, and they go back into their family, and they find this and that, and I said, gee, I want to do that. I want to find out the truth. Okay? Gail learned much from her mom. Delving into our past, we'll speak now.
I'm just getting clearance from my mother. So. I'm going to sit if it's okay, and if people can't see me, then I'll stand. So you tell me. Okay, I know you can't see me now. That's all right. I just wanted to talk a little bit about how we happened to get to Mississippi. When I was growing up, there were lots of stories about it, and I heard them mainly in my grandmother's house because she and her friends and her generation relatives would all sit around the table, or they'd be in the kitchen and they'd talk, and then they'd notice that I was listening, and then, you know, they'd shut the door or send me outside or that kind of thing. So I kind of missed some of those stories, and I found out that some of the stories weren't exactly true. I also found out that many of the stories were, to my surprise and shock, very true. You know? Excuse me, Fred, we're talking over here. Quiet in the back, please. That's all right. Okay, so, how did we get to Mississippi? Benjamin, who we all came from Virginia down to Mississippi. He was 14. My question is why? How? One of the stories I heard came from this person, my mother. It's a really bizarre story to me, but if it could be true, I find it a little strange. She said at 14, he was sent off to ride herd on a flock of turkeys, sending a flock of turkeys from Virginia all the way down to Mississippi, and that's how he just happened to end up in Mississippi. Now, it's an interesting story, but I'm not buying it. I'm sorry.
We're turkey herders.
Well, I mean, for one thing, there are wild turkeys all over there, so why would we herd them? Plus, he was 14. He was born in 1813? Is that right? 1816, sorry. He was born in 1816. So when he was 14, it would be around 1830. And so one of the things I say in this little sheet is, well, what was happening around 1830? And in not just the South, but in practically every island you could, draw a line from island to island. There were insurrections, there were uprisings, there were slave revolts. Here, I'll just mention a few. Haiti, 1791, and that went on to 1804. Barbados, Jamaica, and there's some more. Okay, and here, in this country, right where Ben was growing up, he's 14, Gabriel Prosser in 1800. A place that I've never heard of before, but, thank the Lord it's on Wikipedia now. So Wikipedia knows about us, and we don't even know about us. It's called Igbo Landing, and Igbo is where we came from over there. Igbo Landing, that's in Georgia. and that was 1803. A place in Virginia called Chatham Manor. Now I'm assuming that's somebody's big fancy house. Chatham Manor, 1805. Some place called Orleans. I'm guessing that was down by New Orleans. 1811. Something called the Boxley Rebellion. I've never heard of that. 1815. Denmark BC. Well, most of us have heard of that, right?
Oh, yeah.
That's South Carolina, that's 1822. Nat Turner, well, right around the time that Ben is coming from Virginia, Nat Turner, who was also born in Virginia, also lived in Virginia, and also uprising and killing 60 white people across the backwoods of Virginia, that's when they decided, for some reason, to get rid of Ben and send Ben down to Mississippi. Now, another question is why? Was Ben a knucklehead? Was he, did he have attitude issues? Were they afraid that he might, they may wake up one day and there would be Ben standing over? Why did they get rid of him? I have some guesses about that, but I think one of the main guesses I have is that because he was 14, there was another real compelling reason to send him to Mississippi, because Mississippi in 1820 and in 1830, the United States had these treaties with the Indians, the Choctaws in that case. And I know my grandparents, both of my direct grandmothers, my father's mother and my mother's mother, I said, is there any Indian in us? And both of them would say, Chickasaw and Choctaw. So Choctaw is right where Lexington, Mississippi is now. That's all Choctaw land. And Lexington is where the trading post was for the Choctaw people. That was Choctaw land. So they just signed over with a treaty all this land. And so Mississippi became like California during the gold rush. People rushed in from everywhere because of this free land, or almost free land. All these immigrants, they rushed down to Mississippi, to Lexington, right in the middle of Choctaw land, because it was going for sale really cheap, because they wanted settlers. And it was like the Oklahoma land rush, but except it was the Mississippi land rush. Well, I never knew about any of that stuff, but that was happening right when Ben was being got rid of in Virginia and being sent to Mississippi. So I think it is much more likely that Ben, he's 14, he's 14, 18-ish, that's like prime young buck, age. You get the most.
Breeding.
They have, they have the highest value. You invest in this person, and then you can work forever. And they're young, and they're healthy, and they're muscular, and so they cost the most. So they got a lot, I think, for selling Ben and sending him to Mississippi. That's what I think.
They had the breeding.
Well, that's the other thing, and we'll get to the other part. Yes. When he went, in going from Virginia, I was looking at the roads, the maps from Virginia through, and it's all through native lands, because all that was still whatever you call it, unpacified lands, right? So the road went from Virginia down through the edge of Tennessee and down to Mississippi. And he would have traveled on his journey from Virginia to Mississippi just a few miles from where Sylvia was living. He would have passed her farm. He might have been able to see it. It's so incredible. He passed right by it in order to get to Mississippi. Now, Sylvia was sent to Mississippi as a little girl. Martha, in her interview, her son Jack interviewed her, and she said to Jack, Well, my mother, she was around 7. Other stories say 8. So this child was 7 or 8, snatched from her mother, dragged off to Mississippi from Tennessee. The reason she was sent was because she was supposed to be the, how do you even describe it? The fellow who ran the plantation had a daughter who got married, and he wanted his daughter to have a nice trip going down to Mississippi, right? So his thing was to take this child to send along so that he would both entertain and comfort his daughter, his newly married daughter, and make sure that she didn't have any difficulty on the trip going down. So, you know, to keep this woman happy, this child lost everything. She lost her mother, her brothers, her uncles, her everything. Her daddy, everything. Just gone, just a child. I mean, if you think about your own children, I just find that incredible. So she got to Mississippi, and she was supposed to be guarding. She was supposed to be taking care of this woman's children. And she also was a seamstress, as many of us were. And my mother tells me she was also a lace maker. So she learned lace making from somewhere. And I think at 7 years old, she might have learned a little bit of that in Tennessee, but probably not a lot. She probably learned most of that, I'm guessing, in Mississippi. Last night, I didn't go to bed much because I started reading these letters, and they were interviews of ancient slaves who were 90s and 100s, and most of them the interviews were taken in the 30s, the 20s and 30s. Well, this one woman said, that's right, my mother was sold to a man whose daughter had just gotten married, and she was supposed to, at 8, and you know the age was the same, at 8, she was supposed to not just help this new bride, but also, because slavery, just like you said, was a breeding ground, this 8-year-old was sold so that she could immediately begin, as soon as she was physically able, to have children right alongside the bride, so that she would be the wet nurse in pairing with the bride. And that was part of why they did that. Find little young children, girls, and pair them up with these new brides so that they could be this, you know, this resource. We could go on. But Ben and Sylvia hooked up. They actually got married before the Civil War, and then Ben was sold off. But he wasn't that far away because Ben and Sylvia started having kids, and they had them 60, 62, 64, 65. They were having them like every 2 years. They were having kids. So Ben wasn't that far away. Wherever he was able to get back close enough. And then he came back, and then they had more kids in the same succession. But think if he hadn't, you know, what if they had sold Ben farther away? There wouldn't be anybody in this particular room. None of us would exist if he had just been sent, you know, 2 counties away. It's all a very, to me, a rather bizarre process. You know, the idea of slavery. I don't call them slave owners because I don't believe you can own anybody. I call them slave holders. That's just me. But it's thinking about who we are and who we've come to be. It's a real